Christinas, welcome back to Cristina.zipsims. Today we are going to create a micro home in a modern style just using the base game and the tiny living pack. Before we start building, there's a tiny bit of a difference on the Sims 4 depending on what you want to build in terms of like a tinier house. So we got a micro home which uses 32 tiles between the outside and inside. So anything considered like even a patio or whatever you have inside. For a tiny home you have 64 tiles, and for a small home you will have 100 tiles. Let's get ready and build this micro home together. So we are gonna start off with something that is similar to a square but not properly a square, because of the 32 tiles we're not gonna manage like a proper square. I've seen a lot of people doing them, but I think this is not gonna be the case. So we build the outside. We are gonna have, as usual, we're gonna have just like basically 3 main spaces: a toilet, a main living area with a kitchen, and we are gonna have a bedroom. As it's like a very tiny space, we are probably not gonna have as much space for like a living area, but we are gonna try and fit everything. We'll start off by putting some lights, which I always do forget, and then to have like very dark build. So we just use like regular LED, and then I picked a tiny living, what looked to me more like a modern door, and then I added an arch just to get inside the bathroom, simply because there's not much space. A door might have been like too much in my opinion. And then I added some stairs and a half wall to just like keep the space pretty open, instead of like, I did try like a few different versions and it kind of looked like very closed off. In terms of roof, we started off with something very simple just to cover, like we went for a slanted roof. And then I thought, you know what, like a glass roof and like a mix of like glass and steel could actually work very well for this build. So I did play up quite a lot with the roof, simply because it's kind of like, for me, like roofs, wallpapers and like this kind of details usually take like far longer to me to build up, because I'm like always very undecided. We added some trims which are gonna make the roof like look more put together and like give off the idea of like a modern house. And then I went for a glass roof. I was kind of undecided between like a few of them, but then I went for like a square panel, and I think it kind of like really adds a nice touch, a nice modern touch, and like those black trims like really play like an amazing role with it to like make the house far more put together. So I went for both slanted roofs, and then if you can see on the walls, just under the roof, I just decided to use glass, simply because I think it was gonna add like far more light. And differently from my usual builds and what everyone recommends, I actually didn't start with windows, for the simple fact that I didn't know where I wanted to place kind of everything. Back in the inside, we went for a fence, which I really love this fence. I think it looks very modern and like really adds that tiny something to it, which we use mostly like to separate the bedroom. Wallpaper kind of took quite a long time, but I played a lot with like grey, white, blacks, anything in between, just to have like continuity. I picked the same wallpaper for the bedroom and the living area, simply because they're gonna be like interconnected and there's not like really a wall. For floors, I went for hexa for the kitchen, which is one I absolutely love and I use in almost all my builds. I do get quite easily obsessed with stuff, so I usually go through phases, and then I'm like, oh, I'm gonna still use this one on every build I do. And then I went just for tiles in the toilet, just very simple tiles but with an added detail, and decided to go for something wood but like still keeping like on the grayscale, still like kind of on the grey, so that it was all put together. For the toilet, seeing that like the space is very tiny, there wasn't like much space to add so much and much detail. But I think the biggest thing, like any living space, it's like to add clutter. So I started off just with a shower, a toilet and a sink that looked modern to me, and then they were base game. I kind of used some accents which were from the tiny living pack, simply because I find that on the living pack There's a lot of stuff that we do have, but like some stuff that we really don't have in terms of like furniture for some rooms. And being a micro home, like, and in the park in general, you don't really have much clutter. You do have some shelves, some plants, but like it's very there's a very tiny choice. But so I went a lot for like base game things, and then I added the rug, which I always think it adds like a bit of warmth, but also like just to have like a different color. I went for like white and blue just to give like an accent instead of going for the same like gray, which was gonna like get lost in the whole deal. And then it was a lot of search for like some just some clutter to add like a few things. So I added some shelf we come from the tiny living pack, which are nice, and I tend to add like in a lot of builds simply because I'm like doing kind of like a few micro homes and I think they do really look nice. And then I added just some towels, some toilet paper. I did keep it like quite simple in the beginning, and then I added like a plant which is still from the tiny living pack. It's such a cramped space that like putting a plant would not make it very much like a livable space, and having like the door on that side didn't make it like easier either. So done with the toilet, at least for now, because we're gonna get back to it. The issue with me is that I do tend to like override what I did before and change stuff going on, but I think that's quite normal while you're building. Off to the bedroom, we started with like a tiny living furniture. So we got a tiny desk and a chair just to have like a kind of like a studio space for whoever is living here, and a tiny living dresser and bed. I did change it after a while simply because I was like, you know what, this doesn't scream very modern to me. Adding a few details, which means like, some plants, some clutter, but as well as for the toilet, I do add clutter like while I find stuff, simply because I don't have like a mod that helps me to like kind of find the clutter and things in general, like furniture, pretty easily. So if you do have a recommendation, let me know down in the comments. And for the rest, then we went for another rug, which, as we said, adds that tiny, I think, warmth in a room. I did use like the BB move objects simply because it's easier to like just make larger or smaller like things that don't usually fit. Then I added some clutter again, like just to make the space more livable, more even believable. Like just you don't want to just use I don't know, a couple of plants and be like, okay, we are done. Another thing that kind of complicates my life every time it's like picking art. I do have a lot of like I do have like loads of custom content, which makes it like double complicated to just get onto something that is not custom made. And I'm gonna go with the list for the next few builds. I already have like a list going on of what I'm gonna use next, so that everyone can, if you want to download them or just see wherever other furniture you can have in your game. I find that like this is one of the things that I love about The Sims. There's a lot of space for like creators and anyone in between that like just wants to use stuff that is not like just base game or the packs itself, because like these are mostly like free. And so yeah, I added some shelves just to make it look more lived in, and just to add even like more storage and more like book space, simply because like there's not space where you can put like a true living area. So we had to kind of do like a bedroom. And I know, are you gonna sit always in your bed? I think that like micro homes in this case can be a bit complicated. There's there's a few choices in the tiny living pack with the like kind of like a bed that does come down from like a library and things like this that do save space. But in my opinion, it really didn't fit like the modern look that I wanted to give these micro homes, so I actually avoided using them. So I went just for the bed, like the chair, dresser, and things like this, to still use the tiny pack, the tiny living pack. So then I changed again the bed because why not? And okay, you can get back. So I did change at the end the bed simply because I wanted like a more modern look. So I went for this one from the base game, and then I went on to the kitchen. So kitchens are another room that I do love to make, but I do tend to make like very large kitchens. Why? Simply because I just love them, and I do spend a lot of time in the kitchen, so that's probably why. I think this kind of turquoise like always gives a nice look in the modern homes. If I have to be honest, I do love this color, so I do tend to use it quite often. And I decided that it was a good color, just to like break a bit the grays and whites that we used all around, and then closer to kind of the blue that we used even in the toilet for some accents. So yeah, I did go very large with the kitchen simply because I find that like these spaces, like at the end of the day, you do cook, and um I thought it was better to go larger on this side than like having something like very tiny. And I never find like a good space to. I do realize later that either I have a space for like a table where like Sims can eat, or I have space for a either I have space for Sims to eat, or I forget to put a sofa. So in this case, it did work out kind of without like a living area per se. But I think it came out like a very nice kitchen. I know it looks very large for a micro home, and I think this would be the perfect home maybe for like someone that loves to cook and spend a lot of time in it. And we did add some details like a TV in the bedroom so that you can still have like, you know, the whole kind of like living area. Sure, you can really invite a lot of people in here. There's just a single bed and a single toilet apart from the large kitchen, but you can still have like people around, I guess. So yeah, I do love to add like a lot of bits and pieces and clutter in the kitchen to make really a house a home. And in the kitchen, I think it's even easier to like add a lot of stuff like fruit bowls, tiny plants, clutter that you would have in a kitchen, like, you know, plates, cups, or spoons, and things like this. I always think that they do add a lot of it to the kitchen. So we went pretty simple on here. I didn't go for any like open cabinets or anything to fill up, simply because a lot of the clutter that I love, it's custom content, and in this case we were just gonna use the basic game and the tiny living pack. In terms of art, I did repeat a few things. I didn't see a lot of them that like would fit in here. I had like a few costume content choices that I think would have given like a more modern look, but then again, I just went for something more like simple on that side. Me trying to look for for the right piece to add, it's always like a fun game. So yeah, we went for something simple, still keeping like maybe the same, still keeping the same tiny living pack plants, simply because I think they do just give off like they do give some greenery, and still being like very tiny, they're like easy to position kind of everywhere. In this case, we went for knives and like, you know, very small stuff that could add like a more homey feeling, like a fruit bowl, a couple of plants. Nothing too big, even if I usually love like to put greenery wherever I can. But in these micro homes, like spaces are like so tiny that at the end of the day you do have to sacrifice a few things. Or maybe later on we are gonna manage to do even something even better. There's always space for growing, right? I really want to find like some, maybe like some custom plants that can really work out a lot on like shelves and cabinets on top of it, simply because they can add like a nice touch. Okay, so I love to also add like something on top, like those pots that are like just hanging. I think they do add just a bit of a look to it. And then added some more clutter, yes, so a fruit bowl and stuff. Then I wanted to do something like really different. Instead of going for like the usual, like, you know, back of a kitchen, I decided to use windows instead, so to have like that tiny tiny space and give more light even while you're cooking. I went for like these rectangular windows just to use as like a backsplash. I know it's probably not the best idea in terms of like a real home, but I think I love them. They do really add that kind of I don't know, they remind me very much of like a 60s or like yeah, I think it's 60s or 50s like houses where they had like these very long like windows in the middle of like the in the middle of the walls, and like these kind of like, I think they're called tape windows, and I really love the idea. I think they do add that tiny touch. And then just to add some more final touches, the bin as usual, which is something I completely forget every time. So yeah, I've tried to put a few different things in this kitchen that then didn't really work out. So I just added an apron and things like this just to make it look more like someone is really living there. Some stuff looked nice, but then I didn't think that like in the tiny space really fitted as much as I wanted to. And then I some stuff at the entrance just to like have like that space not covered that you have to cover everything, but I just reckon that like having put the windows after, it kind of like had to move everything around, and it made it kind of more complicated to fit that space with stuff, and I couldn't really find anything that I really loved, so I reused the same plants that I used before, like the hanging one, and I think they did add like a bit of a touch and then used like an empty frame to kind of like frame them, and they did add like a bit of a look to them, I think. So this is the final home, the final micro home. I think there are a lot of stuff, being that we just use like two packs, the basic game and one pack, which was the tiny living, made it more complicated in finding some things that could work out better in terms of like being a modern house. But overall, I did a bit of landscaping, nothing like exaggerate, simply because I wanted to keep it like nice and easy, and because for these builds I'm mostly like concentrating on the inside. Maybe we can go back in another video and do some landscaping around, simply because I don't want them to become like far too long and become like very boring. But I added some, some spiky plants, and I don't know, I think I really like the idea that this might be in like one of those like desert world or things like this. And yeah, but reworked again a bit the the roof, because who doesn't rework the roof every once in a while? These are like just a few screenshots or what you can expect in the house. You can also find this modern micro home in my gallery, which I'm gonna link just down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and if you got to the end of this, thank you so much for staying here. I do truly appreciate your support on Christina.zipsims. If there's anything you would change about this micro home or anything you want to see more on the next few videos, just let me know down in the comments and I'll answer you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you in the next build. Bye!